Hello guys, good day. So this is me Curtis, and for today's video lecture we will be discussing on Globalization of Economic Relations by Istvan Benczes. So this is one main literature that we'll be attempting to study. So here is the reference of our main source. So Benczes is actually specializes on political economy, and he attempted to describe your economic globalization. So here are the following content. Now I believe, and because we also encounter this one, once you read the content of his article, basically you will be overwhelmed by a lot of terminologies. So my task here is that I will attempt to simplify the terminologies, and I'll be providing a summary. But please take note, please do not neglect on the main literature that we'll be attempting to study, okay? It's your task as students to read as well the literature and to understand. My task here is just to help you out, to assist looking into the articles. So here are the following content: defining economic globalization. Then we look into the two arguments, convergence versus divergence. These are products of economic globalization. Are they unifying or dividing the world? Then we go to international monetary system. So we look into the gold standard and your European monetary integration. Then we look into a fast track on your international trade and trade policies. Then we look lastly into your unilateral trade and multilateralism. Now, just a disclaimer, the last part I'll just provide a very simplified or a very short introduction, because there are a lot of treatises that you must look into and attempt to know, no, but I'll just provide the gist. Okay, so moving forward, obviously Benczes defined what is economic globalization. So looking into globalization or economic globalization, it refers to the increasing economic interdependence of national economies across the world through a rapid increase of cross-border movement of goods, services, technology, and capital. So there's been an increase. So looking into my previous videos, diba? When we talk about globalization, biglang may increase agad dun sa connections ng mga nation states natin. Now currently we are experiencing economic globalization, that it seems that our borders or territories seems to be easily penetrated, if that is the appropriate term, by this phenomena. Now the origins, although just to provide you a brief summary or a brief explanation about the origins of economic globalization, the origins of economic globalization has been contested, no? So I only handpick few individuals. So Grill and Thompson argued that nagsimula na daw itong economic globalization during your 16th century, when the Americas began connecting to Afro-Eurasia. So this could be the time of Ferdinand Magellan, no? So doon na nag-start, no? Frank and Gill presented that it already started at a very distant past, around 5000 BC. So you could imagine your empires such as your Persian Empire, your Egyptian Empire, Babylonian empires. So they actually, when we observe history, talaga nagkaroon ng connection between one state to another. So it's between empires and empires. Now actually, when we look into Silk Trade, for instance, or any trades during those time of the empires, na may connection talaga ang mga estado natin. Then last is we have Hearst and Thompson. So sabi ni Hearst and Thompson, no, that although it exists, we could now experience this increased independence during your 19th century. So because of technological innovation, steam engine, then later the invention of your boats, then your airplanes, mas mabilis na ngayon yung pagkonekta ng ating mga national economies. But regardless to say, economic globalization is happening right now. Yan naman yung argument natin. Now, this is one important theme when we talk about globalization as in general, no? So this is hindi lang siya applicable sa economics. It could be applicable as well when it comes to cultural globalization or political globalization. Now, this would now basically justify or later argue yung effects ng globalization. When we look into the purpose of globalization, some would say it attempts to unify yung nation states natin. So we'll now create this new world order, uniformity, confirm. We now attempt to unify all of the nation states in order to achieve ideals such as harmony, world peace, cooperation, economic cooperation, and the rest. Now, some would argue hindi, because of globalization, nangyayari mas nagiging divided yung ating mundo. And the things that have been stated has been reflected by these two themes, wherein we have convergence, then divergence. Now, ano ibig sabihin nito, no? Yung convergence, basically, ito yung sinasabi natin na unifying factor. that globalization simply unifies the globe, your countries, your regions, the people, etc. So globalization fosters economic growth and development. So it's an idea in economic globalization. It is an idea to integrate world economies. We'll attempt to expand our world markets, unify all markets, ensurety of the flow of goods and services. So the theory is structuralism. So when we talk about structuralism in social sciences, simply we're now creating these structures. In an analogy, yung structure is like a body. So yung katawan natin. So yung katawan natin may different organs yan. So the whole world could be considered as one structure, and for every structures may mga body parts yan. So yung body parts na yan may kanya-kanyang function. So looking into the society or into the globe, yung globe na yan would be composed of different nation states. Yung nation states na yan or yung mga national economies natin would now be considered as your organs. So kada organ may function yan. Kung gagawin niya isa yung function niya, doon tayo mag-asin. So doon mag-i-exist, magko-continue na mag-grow yung structure. So ganun yung convergence, no? I hope na-get nyo yung point, no? But basically, convergence is a positive theme or a positive argument towards economic globalization. Now, some would argue, hindi naman. Looking into the present day situation, it does not unify. Actually, it's the opposite. Globalization now divides your world. Dito na tayo papasok sa divergence. When we talk about divergence, globalization causes inequality. So for instance, would now be the imposed system, capitalism, the features of neoliberalism, of free trade, of deregulation, of privatization. Ang nangyayari dyan is, yes, you are idealistic in the sense na it brings economic development, but it's the total opposite. Markets by nature are exploitative. At nangyayari dyan, if you are left behind or if you are overpowered by one capitalistic entity, masisiwa yung sistema. Or mangyayari dyan, you are just being exploited. Diba yun yung nature ng capitalism or imperialism? So more likely, ang nangyayari dyan, we have course, quote-unquote yung world system theory, diba? We have course will now dominate or will just suck up the resources of your peripheries. So nagkakaroon ng global stratification. Instead of equality, as proposed by convergence, that each nation states have the capability to cooperate, to bring their products, ang nangyayari dyan, hindi. That the globe is becoming more stratified. So the gap between your classes in a societal point of view or the gap between your nations ay mas lumalaki. So for instance, would now be yung mga western countries natin. Bakit sila nagiging developed while your third world countries ay hindi nagiging developed, di ba? Yun, speaking about third world system, your theories would be conflict theory or looking to ideologies such as Marxism, di ba? So class analysis yan. Then we also have world system theory, your core, semi-periphery, and your periphery, dependence theory. So these theories will now present stratification that simply globalization causes inequality, causes conflict. So yun yung dalawang themes, no? Divergence positive, divergence negative. Unifying, then dividing factor. Now, looking into history, this is now a quite deep and complicated discussion ni Istvan Benczes, no? So we have defined the international monetary system. I'm having a hard time to simplify this one, but ganito yung definition, no? So first, let's go to your IMS muna. Ano ibig sabihin ng IMS natin? It refers to the rules, customs, instruments, and organization for effective international payment. Now, looking dun sa explanation ko dun sa bank system natin, no? So some countries needed money or needed resources rather, but they don't have the necessary resources, and their aim is basically to make their nations or their national economy progress to develop. Pero wala silang pondo. So anong gagawin nila? Uutang sila. Now, diyan napapasok ko yung IMS natin. So dito makikita natin later role ng IMF or rather yung developments ng ating monetary system, no? It also reflects economic power and interest as money is inherently political, integral part of high politics of diplomacy. So makita natin dito yung United States, which would now take advantage of its currency, no? Although wala na siya sa part ni Istvan Benczes, no? So this would be part of my own bias or my own views, no? Okay, now yung IMS natin, your International Monetary System, was developed by this thing called your gold standard, or actually this is the first modern IMS. So it was dated back early 19th century. Now, yung unang practice nito and later followed by your countries would now be your United Kingdom. Now, if you visualize during your ancient civilizations or ancient history, di ba? Gold was already used as a currency. Now, ginamit pa siya up to today, no? Now, United Kingdom proposes that yung gold na yan, gawin muna natin, ito yung magiging monetary system muna natin. Now, bakit nga ba gold, no? So, gold is believed to guarantee a non-inflationary, stable economic environment. What do we mean about non-inflationary? Hindi siya pwedeng basta-basta sobrahin. Now, when we look into currency kasi pag sinobrahan natin yung money, tendency mawawala yung value yan, no? And bakit nga ba gold, no? Kasi yung resource ng gold gold is scarce. When we look into ancient societies, gold was also used already as a currency. So yung pagka-scarce ng gold, mahirap hanapin, plus yung aesthetic value niya ng ganda, 'di ba? Yun yung naging currency. Hindi siya ganun kadali i-produce. It could now stabilize yung prices in terms of the market. So yun yung naging means of exchange natin, no? Because of the scarcity or yung pagiging rare ng gold. At yun yung naging main determinant of the reserves or the wealth of countries, no? Kasi yung traditional logic natin, no, na the more gold you have, the more wealthier you have, no? Although makikita natin later, they have debunked this system of gold, no? And dito na nga, no, why it failed. Now, deficits in nation's gold reserve would now bring us to the decline in general price of gold. Now, ang nangyari kasi dito when it comes to import goods, it has been already financed by gold. So, in terms of imported goods natin, kailangan natin sa country natin, ano yung pinambabayad natin? Gold. Now, which is now, yun yung nagagamit na din natin yung reserves. So, dahil medyo naging abundant or rather naging, what's the appropriate term? Lagi-lagi na ginagamit yung price ng gold. So, more likely, pang nagge-generalize na siya. So, nawawala yung pagka-scarce niya or yung pagka-rarity. Yung rarity, R-A-R-I-T. So, tendency, dahil lagi na siya nagagamit na ilalabas lagi sa market, yung presyo ng gold medyo nagde-decline. So, more likely, hindi siya nagiging exclusive. Which would now increase the competitiveness in the international market. So, yun yung naging mindset ng mga countries natin. So, kailangan ko ng gold, etc. And because of that, lahat ng countries would now begin determining or rather extracting gold and put it into the reserves. So, lahat ng mga countries natin ngayon ay may gold reserves. At doon na nagkaroon ng problema. Yung konteksto dito, dahil medyo nadideplete na yung national gold reserves, medyo inabandon na siya, no? Which would now later bring us to the creation of your Bretton Woods system. Yung binuo ni Maynard Keynes, no? So, dito na nabuo yung IMF natin or your International Monetary Fund. So, yung task nito is to monitor exchange rate and lend reserves currencies to nations. At dito na nabuo yung fiat monetary system natin or what we call now as your foreign exchange system. So, basing on the, not just the gold reserve, but basing it towards the economic power of a country, doon madedetermine yung value ng currencies ng ating mga nation states, ng ating mga markets. Ngayon may issue, may papasok na yung player which is now your dollar reserve system. Now this is quite a little bit of my bias. I included some not coming from your readings or your main literatures. Now ganito yung nangyari, no? Post World War II, no? So the dominant victor would now be the United States. Now, United States, basically, unti lang naman yung mga damages niya. Although, hindi naman natin sinasabi na malaki yung cost ng, na walang cost yung United States. Now, nangyari dito is, a lot of countries are devastated, no? So, and their economies are well devastated or damaged. So, ang ginawa dito ng United States, parang siya yung naging bida, no? So, sige, kami na yung magtutulong sa inyo upang ma-reconstruct yung inyong ekonomiya. Ngayon, yung mga countries ngayon are now becoming dependent towards the United States. Ang nangyari dito is that some countries would now look into gold as their means in order to develop their or reconstruct their countries. Now, during those time, medyo dependent pa yung mga countries natin. Now, inisip ng United States, no, ganito na lang gawin natin. Alisin natin yung convertibility of the gold system. Now, let's make the countries dependent towards the US. So, they abandon the gold value and they now make your dollar system powerful. So, dun yung reason kaya naging dependent yung ating mga estado. So, going to the next, we now have trade, na international trade. Now, this is quite a very complicated discussion kasi ang daming minensyong trades, no? Pero ganito lang yan, no? Ang nangyari kasi dito is that Benczes now enumerated or narrated rather yung evolution ng ating trade system. During your contemporary times, around 17 to 18th century, ang nangyari dyan is yung trade is in terms of unilateral and bilateral trade. Ngayon, ang nangyayari dito is that simply United States will sign an agreement with Philippines, etc. Blah, 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 ganun, no? Then later, dito na-develop yung multilateral trade, no? What do we mean about multilateral trade? So this is now a trade between not just two nations, no? So this is just, so basically, this is now a group of states will now agree to something, no? The best example would now be your ITO, your International Trade Organizations, at lalo na yung pinakasikat would now be your Bretton Woods General Agreement on Tariff and Trade, no? So dito na lalabas yung ating multilateralism or your multilateral trade. Then later we have your Uruguay round. Then from your Uruguay round, medyo nagkaroon ng complications. So dito na nag-shift from your World Trade Organization. So dito na nabuo yung WTO. Now, ganito yung developments, no? From your trade, dito na lalabas yung a little bit of your stratification. Some countries would now take advantage or nagiging advantageous yung multilateral trades nila, no? And some countries would now gain less or medyo hindi ganun ka-beneficial, no? So dito na papasok yung sinasabi natin na moral ascendancy of developed countries to assist yung mga developing or undeveloped countries natin, no? So nangyari dito is more likely a sense of obligation to help and how to help in terms of trade, no? So for instance would now be your United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, your Uruguay round, then etc., no? However, the problem still exists that although we have the main objectives of assisting countries through trade, nagkakaroon pa ng inequality. And that is a hard reality when it comes to economic globalization. So, ganun yung sistema, no? So, I believe, hindi ko masyado na-define yung monetary system, no? Kasi ang medyo complicated siya. So, yun, no? But regardless to say, ano yung nga ba yung gist na gustong sabihin ni Benczes? Ang gist na gusto niya sabihin is that it would always lead us to the argument that is globalization unifying the countries when it comes to economy, or is it diverging countries, no? So that's it, no? So is it unifying or is it dividing? Yun lang naman talaga yung main themes, no? So thank you guys. So I hope medyo may natutunan kahit unti.